The Colorado Rockies are some of the tallest mountain peaks in North America. Towering above the Great Plains to the east, westbound travelers are greeted by an impressive formation towering nearly 15,000 feet into the sky. Once a formidable barrier to westward settlement, today Americans cross the mountains with ease, and the peaks serve as a beautiful natural attraction for tourists from around the world. Like so many places in the American West, the railroad was the first method of transportation to truly conquer the formidable Rockies, and today we will be looking at one of the most famous and historic rail routes in the country, Union Pacific's Moffat Tunnel subdivision through Colorado's Front Range. Running west from Denver, the line passes through Arvada before rounding the impressive Big Ten curve and beginning its ascent into the mountains. The railroad then twists and turns through tunnels and on ridges as it climbs towards the east portal of the 6.2-mile-long Moffat Tunnel, which carries trains across the Continental Divide and spits them out in the ski town of Winter Park. We've got a lot of beautiful sights and a lot of history to cover, so let's get started. The Moffat Tunnel was first conceived in 1902 by its namesake David Moffat of the Denver, Northwestern, and Pacific Railroad to alleviate the 4% grade and unbearable snowy conditions of their current line through the Rockies. Although Moffat never lived to see it completed, his vision endured. Construction of the tunnel finally began in 1923, 21 years after its first conception, boring more than 6 miles straight through Colorado's Continental Divide. When it opened in 1928, the Moffat Tunnel dramatically shortened the rail route between Denver and western Colorado, cutting hours of travel time and eliminating one of the most treacherous mountain crossings in the state. Today, the tunnel remains a vital link for both freight and passenger trains, standing as a lasting monument to early railroad ambition and engineering perseverance. With the Moffat Tunnel sub primarily being a coal route in the past, recent years have seen a sharp decline in traffic, meaning that catching trains here really requires one to be patient. Luck was on our side today, however, and after about an hour and a half, radio static and a headlight miles down the tunnel signaled the arrival of a train from the west, making for a shot that I have wanted for years. Manifest train MGJ-NY is a thrice-weekly job running between Grand Junction, Colorado and North Yard in Denver, connecting the two sides of the Rockies. They typically run east on Fridays, and today was no different. Expanding on the history of the tunnel from earlier, its actual construction was quite a long ordeal. Following David Moffat's death in 1911, the tunnel remained unrealized until the state of Colorado stepped in, recognizing its importance to the region's economy. In 1922, Colorado voters approved public funding and the Moffat Tunnel Improvement District was created to finance construction through property taxes along the Front Range. Work then officially began in 1923 with crews attacking the mountain from both ends of the new tunnel. Using drill and blast method, workers faced extreme cold, poor ventilation, and deadly levels of exhaust and rock dust deep underground during construction. While progress was slow and dangerous, by 1927 the two headings finally met beneath the Continental Divide. The tunnel opened to rail traffic in 1928, representing one of the most ambitious publicly funded railroad projects in American history to that date, and a turning point for transportation across the Rocky Mountains. As the train pulls away, we hear the massive ventilation fans at the east portal of the tunnel engage. These powerful electric fans are designed to clear the tunnel of toxic smoke and carbon monoxide in just minutes, making sustained rail operations possible and dramatically improving safety for crews working beneath the Continental Divide. When a train shows up on the Moffat Tunnel sub, giving chase is almost always the move, given the high number of scenic locations and low number of daily movements. So that is exactly what we did, as we immediately began pursuing the GJNY downgrade towards Denver. The remote Rockies are certainly a fun place to chase, with some dirt road driving and the railroad right alongside in many locations. We got briefly held up at the crossing in Tolland by the tail end of the manifest, but were soon making ground once again, with the South Boulder Creek serving as the divider between the road and the rails. Leading the GJNY today would be a before and after example of Union Pacific's largest rebuild program. 6809 is a 1996 built AC 4400 CW that has now been faithfully serving UP for 30 years. Behind it, 6187 is its refurbished cousin, an ex-Southern Pacific C44 ACM rebuilt in 2022. The Moffat Tunnel sub in the summer is one of the most refreshing places to chase trains. The air is crisp and relatively cool, the grass is bright green, the mountains are stunning, and I was really just in awe at how incredible this place was. We kept on chasing the eastbound, heading on a steady downgrade from the summit within the tunnel, intercepting once again just west of the next siding in Pine Cliff, Colorado. This small bridge over the South Boulder Creek would draw me back here later in the morning, but for now, the GJNY was pulling into the siding at Pine Cliff, so we jumped ahead again to the east switch where 6809 was notching down to a stop. When meeting trains on a stretch of track like the Moffat, priority is almost always given to trains climbing the grade, as it is more difficult for them to stop and start than those going downhill. This means that if there is opposing traffic running, which there was this morning, eastbound trains on this side of the tunnel can sometimes be in for a long wait. This morning it was about 45 minutes before the all-too-familiar sound of Genesis prime movers filled the air, signaling the arrival of Amtrak's Westbound California Zephyr climbing the grade. Passengers on this train are treated to one of the most spectacular rides in the country along this stretch of track. Our plan was to chase number 5 all the way back to the tunnel, but UP had other plans. We followed them back as far as Rollinsville, but waiting in the siding there was another eastbound freight. So we turned around and it was back to the South Boulder Creek Bridge a little sooner than I had anticipated. Three big EMDs were in charge of a morning eastbound HPVO-DEN, a BNSF trackage rights manifest train out of Provo, Utah, bound for the Mile High City. BNSF was granted trackage rights over the UP from Denver to Stockton, California via Salt Lake City as a condition of the UP-SP merger in 1996 in an effort to preserve competition by giving shippers who had previously had access to both UP and SP access to a second railroad. 30 years later, the rights are still going strong, and the PVO-DEN and its counterpart are daily staples on the Moffat. With the two eastbound freights running back-to-back, we were motivated to give further chase back towards Denver. Before we could get far, we got held up by the tail end of the BNSF trackage rights train at Pine Cliff once again. There was one more spot up in the mountains where I wanted to try and get the BN train before descending towards Denver. Located at milepost 30, Crescent sits on a ridge offering an incredible view looking down into the city's suburbs miles away. Alas, we only got up to the end of the train here once again, but the outward-facing DPUs ended up making this shot look just fine. After Crescent, the next spot that was doable on the chase was Arvada, and there were quite a few locations to choose from. Arvada is where the tracks emerge onto the face of the Rockies and turn into a series of complex horseshoe curves, allowing trains to shed altitude at a steady rate as they drop into the Denver terminal. For our first spot, we settled on Blue Mountain Drive at milepost 23. We actually managed to beat both of the trains here, with the GJNY arriving just as we pulled in, emerging from the mountains into a field of grazing cattle before entering the Big Ten curve immediately to the east. And in just a few minutes, here comes the BN train. Arvada showcases just how extreme this downgrade is. With the locomotives at a definitive downward angle, the ridge the train is on now is only 1 track mile away from our cameras where the train will be level with us. As the DPUs traverse the ridge above, the head end of the train reaches our cameras, and some perfect timing puts both sets of power briefly in the same frame, making for one of my favorite shots of the day. The Moffat Tunnel sub is former Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad trackage acquired by Union Pacific in 1996 through their merger with Southern Pacific after they had absorbed the DNRGW in 1988. While the tunnel is the crown jewel of the line, scenically, the series of tight curves around Arvada offers some of the most compelling rail fanning on the entire subdivision, where trains snake through incredibly complex feats of engineering with the front range rising dramatically in the background. With the trains continuing east, they would now be entering the Big Ten curve. Encompassing 2 passing sidings and 2 horseshoe curves, this nearly 5-mile stretch of track in Arvada is where trains truly drop out of the mountains. Today, we would be incredibly lucky as we would put the drone up and get to see 2 back-to-back trains traversing these curves simultaneously. Pretty cool if you ask me. actual Big Ten curve, which is the centerpiece of this complex, is named for its radius of 10 degrees. Sitting atop a ridge, there is a string of hoppers permanently placed on the curve to protect trains from wind gusts. As the PVO-DEN enters the curve, I will cut the narration for a bit and let you enjoy this true spectacle of Western railroading. As the BN Manifest came to a stop at Rocky Siding to tie down, the drone gives us a great view of what lies ahead of the train, including the skyscrapers of Denver in the distance. As for us, it was now time to head back into the mountains for the afternoon action after a very successful morning. Moving back west, we continued to be mesmerized by the beautiful scenery of the Colorado Rockies. We took another look at Crescent, where we caught a work excavator moving through the siding before continuing towards the Moffat Tunnel. Arvada to the tunnel is only roughly about 30 track miles, and it is incredible how this mountain wilderness exists so close to the outskirts of a major city like Denver. We timed up the lull in rail action well with our drive, because as soon as we got back to the east portal, a train was approaching. It was the eastbound Rocky Mountaineer. A private rail tours company, the Rocky Mountaineer runs 4 scenic routes in both Canada and the United States through its namesake mountain range. This route is a 2-day journey from Arches National Park in Moab, Utah to Denver with an overnight stop in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. The Rocky Mountaineer utilizes impressive custom-built coaches designed to allow passengers to really take in their surroundings. They feature oversized glass dome windows and reclining seats, which are complemented by attentive onboard service while giving passengers an uninterrupted view of the mountain wilderness in absolute comfort. We pulled off next in Tolland, grabbing a shot of the luxury train negotiating the curves along the South Boulder Creek. We kept up our pursuit of the Mountaineer into Rollinsville, where the open valley provided a stunning backdrop for these beautiful passenger coaches. The locomotives on the train are owned by the company, the leader being an EMD SD40M-2 in a baby blue paint scheme, and the second unit being an EMD GP40-3 in the corporate colors. It is great to see these old EMDs getting a second life on such a cool passenger train service in such a beautiful part of the country. Like we had done now so many times today, with the train clear of Rollinsville, we hopped in the car and made our way to Pine Cliff for our next shot, this time setting up on the outside of the curve at the siding's east end. At Pine Cliff, we bid the Rocky Mountaineer farewell. We would have continued the chase, however we had gotten word that a westbound train was on the way, and any further pursuit east would have let that train slip past us. I had wanted to get a westbound going uphill all day, so we staked it out at Pine Cliff for about 45 minutes before the sounds of more EMDs filled the air. BNSF knows what kind of power pulls out here, with 2 more SD-70 Aces on the point of the Den PVO manifest train battling the Rockies on its ascent towards the tunnel. There was another shot in Rollinsville where I had been keen on getting a westbound, so we headed back out of Pine Cliff before the entire train passed to ensure we'd beat them there. It didn't end up being close, and after about 5 minutes the train rounded the curve into town amongst a stunning mountain backdrop as viewed from the Route 119 overpass. The PVO Den is a mixed bag of traffic ranging from boxcars to tankers and grain hoppers. While it and its counterpart that we saw earlier were not incredibly long trains, the 5 locomotives used for power are a true testament to how tough the grades out here are. On a flat stretch of track, this consist would rarely need more than 2 locomotives to get the job done. By now, you know the drill. As soon as the DPUs cleared, it was back in the car and back on the chase towards the tunnel. We caught up with the train again at Tolland and grabbed another shot along the South Boulder Creek Rapids at a location that felt right at home in the Colorado Rockies. After this beautiful scene surrounded by river rapids and tall pine trees, our plan had been to chase the train all the way to the East Portal, but Union Pacific had other ideas. Sitting in the Tolland siding was another eastbound waiting for the Den PVO to clear. Shocked by how much traffic was being sent our way, we made a quick U-turn and booked it back to Rollinsville to intercept. With a farm field of yaks in the background, the UP 8760 leads a unit crude oil train downgrade towards Denver. Originating in Utah a few times per week, these crude oil trains have been a nice boost in traffic for this route, which was hit very hard by the decline in coal traffic. Believe it or not, we hadn't yet exhausted all of the angles to shoot between Rollinsville and Pinecliff, so we hopped back in the car and made a beeline for milepost 37 to set up on a curve midway through Pinecliff siding to catch the oil train one more time. With the quick flurry of freight action now dying down, we knew that the final train in the picture for a few hours would be Amtrak number 6, the eastbound California Zephyr. We wanted to try and get one more shot of a train at the east portal, so that's where we headed, and we could not have cut it closer, as 10 seconds after we pulled in, number 6 emerged into the daylight. Number 6 would be our last train of the day, so we set off to follow them back towards Denver. Passing under the train a couple of miles east of the tunnel, in about another 30 seconds, PTC would put them into emergency, necessitating a brief stop. This gave us time to set up at the dirt road crossing in Tolland with a stunning snow-capped mountain backdrop, and in about 10 minutes, number 6 was back on the move. Heading out of the area, we made sure to hit some of our favorite spots from throughout the day one more time. We wrapped up our chase back at the face of the Rockies in Arvada for another look at a train negotiating this spectacular downhill track profile as number 6 drops into the Denver suburbs. The stunning scenery with the late afternoon lighting conditions made this shot a perfect one to end on.
Talk about that signal up there?
As number 6 heads into the Big Ten curve, we also look ahead to our urban destination for the evening, preparing for a good dinner in Denver after a spectacular experience along the historic and scenic Moffat Tunnel subdivision. I hope you enjoyed riding along, and I thank you for watching.